Perfect. Okay, I'm going to start the presentation. Everything all right?
Oh, good. So,
Okay,
go in and do your job.
thank you. So I'm here to talk about the bare minimum, accessibility in web, and the journey on how to fix 96.8 of the websites online. And a little spoiler alert, this talk is not Vue specific. It's going to cover the best practices that can be applied in every framework. So a little bit about me. I'm the person in the picture that's not touristic at all here in Athens. I'm a front-end engineer at the Career OS. We are a platform that tries to empower students to find the perfect job. And I was born in Romania, but I've been living in Barcelona for the last 3 years. Um, Normally, I've worked as a front-end engineer for the last 12 years. And during this time, I've worked on Angular, the first Angular, Angular 2, and then I moved to React, and now I'm working full-time using Vue. And it's safe to say that I like Vue the most. That's why I participate in the Vue community. And I like to write tech articles about Vue or JavaScript topics. And you can follow me on Twitter or Medium at Nesjudan. So I also have a cat and a Greek friend called Fotis. He put me up to give this talk here at Vue.js Athens. So let's dive in. So I'm going to talk about the why and how of accessibility, common accessibility issues, and how we can make the web more accessible. So the why and how of accessibility. So thinking the modern workflow of a web application has gotten really complicated now. So the life cycle of a feature usually goes like this. So the UX does some research or some benchmarks to get some insights on what the product or website is missing, and then gives that research to the product owner, who usually writes a document called a PRD, like a product requirements document, or PID in other companies. And once you have this document, the engineering manager is going to create a Jira story. It will get refined and prioritized, and it will enter a sprint. They will break the story into very small tasks that can get picked up by the dev team, by the QA, and together they're going to release a feature in production. Once in production, the feature will probably be A/B tested to make sure it's performing correctly, and the results are analyzed by a data analyst at the end of the life cycle. So to look at a clear example, let's think about an e-commerce website that is selling shoes. Pretty popular website, and the platform or the company keeps hearing feedback that users go to a product page, the shoes are sell out, and they want to save those shoes for later, maybe when they come back into stock. So they want a favorite feature to favorite, or a wish list. So we know the user's main pain point. We give this to UX research. They create a prototype. They use users to interact with it. They get positive feedback. And then the PO takes that information and writes, like I said, the product requirements document, which is usually 5-6 pages about what user base we are targeting, what design we have chosen, what the impact we think will be, and what analytic events we are adding, and so forth. Afterwards, the engineering manager takes that document, breaks it into a story, breaks it into smaller tasks, they refine it, and it goes into a sprint. We now know that it needs a backend, a logo, we have the design, we have everything we need. And then it goes to be A/B tested in production. So now we have this very small icon on the right. And one thing you might miss in this entire workflow is the word accessibility. And the reality is this: we have a barely visible icon on the right over there. It doesn't have any label, it doesn't have any ARIA role, and the button has no description whatsoever. And if you inspect it using DevTools, you'll see that it's not actually a button, but a HTML div. So maybe you are lucky and this is not the case for your company, and the developer might know some best practices about accessibility, or would check Lighthouse for performance issues, and some accessibility issues might pop out. But here they were not so lucky. So why is that? And the reality is that in the life cycle of a feature, the PO usually focus mostly on feature results. So, and the devs focus on delivering and maybe on some web performance because it's trendy right now. It impacts SEO, a little bit of core web vitals, but accessibility is the odd man out and usually left at the end. And what product doesn't realize is that by ignoring accessibility, they are missing on a huge chunk of users. The World Health Organization, in numbers, have estimated that around 1 in 6 people are suffering from a disability. That means 1.6 billion people, billion with a B, can probably be affected by your website's lack of accessibility. So that means there are multiple types of disabilities, like people with motor disability who are using voice recognition software, adaptive keyboards, mouse sticks, and eye tracking software to browse your website. Then we have people with visual disabilities who are using screen readers or braille software. We have people with auditory disabilities who are using hearing aids or sign language or are reading transcripts from your videos. And then we have people with cognitive disabilities who are using communication tools. So we need to make sure that all of them, regardless of type of disability, can browse our product as easily and smoothly as possible. And if you think about it, 1 in 6 people, that means 16% of your user base. So think about that number a little bit. When we see an increase of 1% in conversion, this is a huge win for the company. But 16% of the user base can be affected, and we don't even take it into account. So let me talk a little bit about the common accessibility issues that we have. So the WebAIM Million project is, for the past 4 years, this project has run an accessibility test on the top 1 million websites in the world. The Million homepage list combines the top homepages and domains from all sorts of categories, and it already excludes homepages that return errors, 404s, or pages with fewer than 10 HTML elements. And the result is that 96.8, that's almost 100% of homepages, have accessibility issues. And the most depressing thing is this number, 96.8, is actually an improvement. In 2019, when this project started, the actual number was 97.8. So in 4 years, we have managed to decrease the number of websites with errors just by 1%. So we made incredible progress in web technology over the last 4 years. We have web performance with core web vitals that are impacting SEO. And we have frameworks like Vue.js that have dominated the front-end landscape, yet we only decrease the accessibility errors by 1%. Hopefully, we're seeing a bigger push into the future. And the good news is that all of these errors can be categorized into 6 groups. So we have low contrast text errors, missing all text, empty links, missing form labels, empty buttons, and missing document language. Besides these big 6, we still have 1 or 2 more errors that I'm going to talk about a little bit in detail. So let's go through each of these problems, see how it can impact our user base, and how we can fix it, and what's the best practice to apply. First, the first principle of accessibility says that every text on your website needs to be perceivable. And we have to make sure that everyone can read the text. That means people who suffer from color blindness or people with low vision. So the WebAIM Million report for 2022 found that nearly 84% of the website have at least one low contrast violation. So let's see an example in practice. Here on the screen, we have 2 colors. And just by looking at them, you can tell that both of them are very, very bright. You can tell this, of course, if you are not visually impaired. If you are, you may probably do not see them at all. So the WebAIM provides a calculator to measure the ratio. So you just input these two colors and you get a report like you see on the right. So these two colors have a contrast ratio of 1.06 to 1. So just those numbers, it basically means that you can put the same color on top of each other, and that doesn't make for good text reading experience. So let's look at how they look together. And just by seeing them, you can tell that this is not a good experience that you want on your website. And on the left, you can see that it fails every accessibility requirement. So now that we know that this is how it should not be done, obviously, what do we need to make it good? So the World Wide Web Consortium has two guidelines for success. Most text needs a ratio of at least 4.5 to 1 against its background. These rules are a little bit laxer if you have large text, so it only needs a ratio of 3 to 1 against its background. And the best thing about this is that we can actually automate this check. Designers and UX researchers can use popular plugins in Figma and Sketch that check color contrasts and catch this from the design point and doesn't have to reach production. Developers can use tools like Lighthouse or Visual Test to measure the contrast ratio of their components and make sure low contrast test does not reach production. So as you can see, it's essential that all users can easily read the content on our website or web application. So everybody loves a good image or meme. It can easily turn a mediocre piece of content into a modern masterpiece, like this one that you see here. So just imagine the amount of time and skill you spend crafting this perfect joke and having 16% of your audience not even knowing it's there. Why? Because screen readers cannot interpret images without alt text. And that leaves visually impaired users with no way to understand the image's content. Alt text is read out loud by most screen readers, and they can understand the context that your overall content or website is giving. And if your website is full of instructional information like infographics, details, and stuff like that, you're putting them at a severe disadvantage. And again, luckily, this is also very easy to automate. And you can have a simple ESLint rule that can catch images with empty alt text. But then the question remains, if you put this ESLint rule, does all images need alt text? And the answer is no. If you have decorative images or images used as background that is just for design purposes and do not bring any new information to the user, then it's recommended to just ignore the alt tag and add a presentational role to your images. Why? So you don't overload screen readers with useless information and bring a simple flow to the impaired user. And speaking about screen readers, the number one problem they encounter are empty links. And when I mean empty links, I usually mean something like this. You have an anchor tag and you forgot either by mistake to place the text inside, or intentionally you put a class or an SVG that is supposed to represent an icon. Right? And for us, if you see an icon, you can tell what it is, but screen readers cannot differentiate between empty text or icons. So the way to do it, you have to add ARIA labels that tell you, hey, this link is going to go to the Facebook page. And you can put the icon itself as ARIA hidden true, so it doesn't impact the screen readers. Better yet, you can add screen reader only text that you can hide from normal for everyone else that are not using screen readers. Integrating Lighthouse in your development pipeline will normally catch empty links like this, but it will ignore navigation done programmatically by the framework. So for example, if you have on-click events that just take you and you use router push or link push, then these will not be caught by screen readers. So if possible, try to use framework-specific elements like live, link, navlink, etc., as they transform the element into native HTML elements. And I want to, for the next step, for the missing form input labels, I want you to imagine going to a popular e-commerce website, like the one we talked about earlier, right? You just want to buy some shoes. You browse the website, you filter, you sort, maybe you go to your wish list if you can, and then you add something to the cart. After that, you might sign up and you want to reach checkout. Once you've reached the checkout and you want to add your delivery address or actually pay for your product, then you are seeing something like this. And this is what your users who are using screen readers are seeing when you don't properly add labels to your inputs and rely on CSS design gimmicks to prompt for the correct information. Can you probably navigate this form? Maybe you can guess that some are date or some are selects and you can click them, but most of them are very not user-friendly. And adding proper labels, like here, we need to add area required, area described by, an actual label that uses the for to correlate between the label and the input. But you can also add like helper information using area described by to tell the screen reader what it needs to add. And this is true for all sorts of inputs, not just text and email. So we need to add labels and descriptions to all input types like checkboxes, radio, text area, etc. And this is actually just the first step. The entire form submission flow should be accessible to all users, interacting with buttons, error handling, and success messages. Too many times I've seen an order created dialog that it's dynamically created inside the framework and doesn't have any area role attached. These are never going to be visible to screen readers. So you have people trying to submit the form over and over again without seeing the success message. So pretty sure these users will probably never order from your website again, or actually going out of their way to cancel their order and give you a very bad review. So now speaking about using buttons. Empty buttons are just like empty links, but way worse. So buttons must have like a programmatic name so people using assertive technologies can gather information about how to activate the button or what it does. If there's no text describing the functionality, screen reader users will not know what it does and will probably never use it. Right. So the most common situation that you can encounter is like you have search buttons that include only icons, or even worse, that they are designed using pseudo elements like before and after. And this button gives no indication to the user there is actually something there. And the solution to this, of course, is to always add area label or area labeled by attributes. And just like links, if you have Vue click event handlers, make sure to also add enter pressed or on space pressed events, because normally screen readers, when encountering a button, can interact with it using enter and space buttons. And a critical mistake you can make is to give the button role to a div with an event handler, right? As screen readers are using enter and space, it's critical to add these to the div. Otherwise, the browser does not know what to do with it, and your event handler will never be used. And speaking of interacting with buttons, keyboard accessibility is essential for people who are not using a computer mouse. Many blind and visually impaired people also use keyboard interactions in order to use their screen reader. So we always need to have focus values to our buttons and elements so screen readers know which element is in focus now. You can see in the image the clear difference between when you have focus and when you don't. In the second part, the afternoon button is in focus, but you cannot tell any difference. And a visible focus also helps people with executive dysfunctions and other vision or processing related issues like light sensitivity, headaches, ADHD, migraines, because it draws attention to one thing at a time. This helps reduce the cognitive load. So as best practices, do not use outline 0 or outline none or other styles that remove or limit the visibility of keyboard focus. Avoid overriding the default browser behavior, and design accessible hover and focus state using the color contrast ratio that we saw first. And of course, use semantic HTML for buttons. And if you have already solved the focus and hover state, we absolutely have to make sure that our entire app can be used without a mouse. That means to not hijack the scroll behavior. And it's very important to keep the order of the navigation, the order of the HTML elements of the page, because they need to follow the flow of the page. So try not to use too much like the CSS flex functionality that you can just reverse them and keep the normal flow of the page, like having the header first, then the navigation, then the main, and finally the footer. And digging deeper, keep a normal context flow. So page elements that are not interactive to mouse or touch users should not be made keyboard focusable. So do not abuse the tab index role, because making non-interactive element keyboard navigable will cause confusion. And if you have a long list of links, so if your menu is like 10 items long, and it's okay when you're using your mouse to just like click it and it will expand or not, but you need to provide a skip to the main content on the page so screen readers can go to the content they desire to see. And the most important part is to actually test your application using a keyboard. A really good idea is to invest in some end-to-end tests that only use the keyboard to interact with your application. I don't mean to go a little overboard with this. Doesn't mean to, for each feature you build, it has to be testable by the keyboard, but you can just research the most common flow into your application. So for example, from the product page to a successfully placed order, you want, this is the most critical part of your application, and you want to make sure that it can be done using a keyboard. So you can use a library called Cypress Real Events, and using it, you can simulate the entire flow by clicking or pressing tab or pressing space or pressing enter, using the keys and so forth. And if you want to correctly navigate the content of your application, we have to make sure we don't have any heading issues. So use headings to give structures. So we want to keep the correct hierarchy of the heading. So you have to use H1 as the main heading, the most important content on the page. And then we have to group our H2, H3, again H2, H3, and so forth. So headings should be made in the correct order because they announce the start of a new topic in our content. And it's very easy for screen readers to navigate. Try to not skip headings and to use semantical HTML again. Do not just style your divs as bigger text. Use actual H1, H2, H3 if that is the case. So missing document language. Language declaration is an HTML attribute that you put at the beginning of the HTML tag. And it denotes the default language of the content on a page or post. So language declaration is usually already set by the framework by default or by bootstrapping an application. And it's usually set in English. So if you want to have your website in another language like Greek, it's always important that you change it. Or even better, if you have multiple languages and you're using internationalization, you have to make sure that this tag changes dynamically when you change the language. Because in addition to helping people with disabilities, like they have braille keyboards that can read aloud the content and put the correct accent if it's in the correct language, it can also help translate people who do not know the actual language of your website. So all through the talk, I've been talking about ARIA attributes and how to add them, and usually they are like the solution to all our problems. But believe it or not, no area is actually better than bad area attributes. And the reason for this is the WebA Million report found that homepages with area present have 70% more errors than those without. And one reason for this is the browser is pretty smart to inherit or guess the actual area attributes. And if you override them with empty strings or bad content, you are basically breaking the HTML native features. So with these area attributes, with great power, also comes great responsibility. So using them, you can create fully accessible components, like the first example, but you can also override normal HTML behavior by adding a log role to our table. Our screen readers will not perceive this as a table, and they will not get to reach that data. So before creating components, please check this amazing website called Patterns that has like all these components already made with best practices. You can find links, listbox, menu buttons, switchers, dialogues, and tabs, tables. Everything is made fully accessible. So you can see here how to make a correct component. So making the web accessible. Thinking back before about the life cycle of a feature, now that we know the best practices and how to use them, it's not all about the dev work, what the developer needs to do, but we have to integrate accessibility into all parts of the life cycle of a feature. So we know in the UX research, we want to involve people with disabilities in our user testing practices. We want our PMs and POs to add accessibility success criteria inside their documents that they're creating for their stakeholders. We need to put accessibility score in the definition of done for all of our stories. And we need to add test using Lighthouse CI, using visual tests, and writing keyboard only end-to-end tests to make sure that our website and app is accessibility friendly. And I know we are all busy and have a lot to do, but try to make it a practice to at least try once the product you are building with using only a keyboard or a screen reader, or try some amazing Chrome extension that simulate what impaired users are seeing when they are using your application. So I'm going to leave you with a fun fact. So if a website is funded by the European Union, it needs to be accessible by law. And I truly believe that if we want to live in an inclusive society, we need to make sure that every website needs to be accessible, not just those founded by the European Union. So here are some tools that I'm going to share them on Twitter after this talk is over, and also the slides, of course. And you can check all of these tools out that can help you with your accessibility to verify guidelines, the plugins for Figma and Sketch, the headings map Chrome extension that will tell you if your headings are in the correct order. Wave evaluation will give you an accessibility evaluation. You have Lighthouse CI to integrate in your CI/CD pipeline that can check the accessibility score of your pull request. Of course, the Chrome Developer Tools is amazing. It has an accessibility tab that shows you each element, what area labels is using. And then we have some Chrome extension that can simulate dyslexia, color blindness, or all sorts of disabilities, so you can see what is happening in your app. So my name is Nechudan. Follow me on Twitter for the slides and questions that you may have. Super proud to be here. I'm super excited. Efharisto. Thank you.
Whoa, that was amazing. Really inspiring. Your talk, whoops. Okay, and so your talk was real motivating and inspiring. I really enjoyed it. We have some questions from Fotis.
Wow.
Who is asking? Who is asking? Who is responsible to make a website accessible? Is it a product or a development decision? So it's a stakeholder question.
Yes. So I believe obviously we have to work together, but it's the developer who should drive the discussion because we have more knowledge than other people, and um, we can see and show where are people impacted.
Hmm. Hmm. Perfect. And do you have any advice when adding accessibility lately to a product?
Well, normally I would start by adding ESLint rules to make sure you're not making the matters worse, the first thing. And then just auditing your most important features and going down from there uh, to add accessibility slowly and surely.
Hmm. Nice. So Stefanos is asking how to introduce accessibility to a team in order to start adding it gradually in a project.
Yeah, so like I said, ESLints to make sure you're not making the project worse. But then you can easily start integrating CI pipeline tools like Lighthouse that can check the score of the application and the score of your feature that your team is working on.
Nice. Perfect. And also, here's a question. Is Vue.js and Flask getting better together in meantime?
Vue is certainly getting better.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you